Hello, my name is Rocco Strangio, and I'm the host of the Law, AI, and Money podcast. I bring on attorneys, engineers, and entrepreneurs to unravel the world of AI and to discuss how it'll affect the legal profession. Today, I'm joined with Gino Buzzelli, a product developer at Microsoft. For over 10 years, he's worked on Microsoft Teams, and now he focuses his practice on developing Microsoft's newest AI platform, Copilot. Gino is widely regarded to be one of the top AI experts in product development, and as a result, it's a privilege to have him on and to share his insights. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Gino, thank you for taking the time to come on and speak with me today. I first want to get into your role at Microsoft. What are you currently doing at Microsoft? What's your role, your position? And then we'll talk about what you're working on.
Thanks for having me. So I've been at Microsoft for about 10 years. Most of my time at Microsoft has been spent working on collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams. I spent about 8 years on that. The last 2 years has been more focused in AI, trying to help develop Microsoft's story there. So specifically, it's Microsoft Copilot. That's the feature I've been working on and bringing that into Microsoft Teams.
So what's Copilot? For those of my viewers that don't know too much about it.
Yeah, Copilot is a new product by Microsoft, and it's a AI-powered productivity tool. And we are aiming to bring it into all of our tools. So it's one AI tool that users can interact with that brings all of their data in the Microsoft ecosystem, along with all their tools, brings it together to help them do things like draft documents, form insights, just get their jobs done quicker and more efficiently.
How do you foresee a lawyer being able to use Copilot to improve their legal practice?
I think you're definitely going to love it once you check this out, but you can do things like draft documents really quickly. I'm sure you go through a lot of data right now.
You do a lot of contracts and
yeah,
a lot of filings.
Okay, so being able to quickly parse through large amounts of data and pull out certain insights, that kind of thing it's really good at. So it just helps you, form insights, draft new things, generate new content, images, that kind of stuff. Something I use it a lot for at work right now is probably one of my favorite features is after a meeting, we have a Copilot in Microsoft Teams meetings. So after my meetings, which I'm in a ton of meetings at work, I can ask Copilot, summarize that meeting. What were the action items? Was there anything I was supposed to do? And it will give me like, hey, here's a summary, a bulleted list. Here's some things that you said you were going to follow up on. Others asked for this information from you. So it just makes my job way easier to have that. It's essentially an assistant that follows me around my job and the tools I use. So it's very powerful.
Wow. A lot of what we do is analyzing PDFs. Is there any way to also use it to analyze PDFs like large, dense medical records, for example?
So I know Adobe has some tools too, but for Microsoft, the ones I've seen are really the Word docs. So we're putting Copilot in Microsoft Word. So if you're going through a large Word doc, you can use Copilot to ask questions, make changes, So yes, I don't know about the PDFs though. I imagine we're going to get there eventually, but right now, top of mind goes to Adobe. I know they're working on that.
And Microsoft Office is what Copilot pretty much extends to.
Yeah, so well, even beyond that. So Copilot, it's a new product, right? So you pay for Copilot, it's a monthly fee for the users. And then once you get that, you will have access to Copilot in Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Bing, Windows, it's across the board. So we're bringing it into all of our products.
Oh, awesome. ChatGPT obviously is being used pretty widespread. How does that differ from Copilot?
There's similarities and differences. They're both large language models that with interfaces on top of them that users can interact with, and they will generate content. So you can kind of have a conversation back and forth. They differ in that Copilot has access to, it's integrated in all your other Microsoft tools. So it can reason over more data than just what the model was built on. So for example, I use Copilot almost every day at work. One of my favorite scenarios is, so we use I work on Teams. I'm in a lot of Teams meetings a lot, and they are often recorded. When those meetings get recorded, those files are saved, and that because that's in my Dataverse at work, Copilot's able to access that data. So after a meeting, I'll be like, what was that meeting about, Copilot? And tell me, were there any action items that were on me? And it could be like, a 2-hour meeting, and it'll quickly go through the transcript and say, yeah, here's a summary of what that meeting was about. Here are some things that you said you were going to do follow-ups on. So it makes my job a lot easier to quickly parse that data, and I don't have to remember everything. It's like your assistant.
Is it limited to Microsoft applications currently? And is there a future where we can use it for other applications, let's say LexisNexis?
Yeah, we're working on making the integration between these tools better. We already have a way to do it. We call it plugins today, where a product like LexisNexis can build a plugin that lets Copilot connect to their services. So when you ask Copilot a question, what it's going to do is see if it has the answers, and if it doesn't, it's going to see if there's any tools available like LexisNexis that might have the answers, and if it does, it will query those for the information it needs, bring it back, compile your response.
That's awesome. I think that Copilot obviously is going to change how we interact with people at work. Do you see it affecting your workspace currently, and how is it doing that? How is it affecting work relationships?
So I can't say I see it affecting work relationships right now, but the way we interact with each other is slowly starting to change. We're putting tools in, you draft a proposal, which others are reviewing. AI is helping you draft that proposal now. So when you transact that document, others are getting something that was touched by AI. In Teams, we're using AI to help you draft messages and summarize conversations. So we are putting AI into the conversation. So I expect in time it will make maybe conversations maybe more concise, maybe more direct to the point, less opportunities for people to forget things that were mentioned earlier in the conversation. So kind of work in progress, I guess, is the answer. We'll see.
How long have you guys been working on Copilot? It seems like just now, and we can talk about this later, but now it's becoming so popular. Like AI is such a buzzword. How long have you guys been working on it?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't remember how long it's been that it has been, this is now Copilot you're working on, but I've been working in the AI space since December 2022 is when I kind of got moved there. And at some point along the way, that became, this is the Copilot work stream that you're on, and that's what we're building.
How do you guys design it? What are some of the ways that you say, okay, we're going to take this out, or we need this? How does building Copilot look from your perspective?
Pretty similar to how we've always built our products, but different in the regard that there's way more, there's a lot of people across the company working on Copilot. It's a massive effort. It's not just my team by any means. It's a lot of teams at Microsoft currently working on this. Building products with AI in them is different than, when I worked on, for instance, I was on Teams for a while. When I worked on the ability to let you like a message, for example, that was pretty straightforward. The user does this, they like the message, this is what it's going to look like. It's a deterministic interaction.
I use it all the time.
Yeah. So we call that like more of a deterministic interaction, where when you click something, you will always get the same output, that we expect the same results.
Okay.
With AI, whenever you're interacting with these models, you don't have the benefit of having predictable outcomes. So if I give the same input to any one of these models 10 times, I will get 10 different outputs. That's just the nature of how they work. So building products around something that is not totally predictable is very different. We have to...
A lot of trial and error.
Trial and error, but we also have to move with a lot more caution than we normally do. We have to put more disclaimers like, hey, this is an AI-generated response. Could be wrong. Don't bank on this 100%. Like I saw there was a lawyer recently that got caught just putting things in the court that were just totally AI generated and didn't check his work there. You have to. So building these products is just done with a lot more caution than non-AI products.
What are some of the tools that you guys use to mitigate some of the negative effects that might come out of this? I'm sure you guys have your own personal lawyers that check everything to see whether it's ethical or not, but what are some of the checks and balances let's say, because recently there's been a hiccup with Google's Gemini project. For those of you that don't know, and you can explain how this happened, but there was a lot of outrage because Google's Gemini project was producing images of the founding fathers as multi-ethnic individuals. Could you explain how that happened, and what are some of the ways that your company implements checks and balances so that stuff hopefully doesn't happen?
I'm familiar with the incident you're talking about. I don't know the specifics, but I believe what happened was anytime you asked Gemini to create an image, it was appending to the end of your prompt. So if I said, show me a picture of the founding fathers, what the underlying model would get was, show me a picture of the founding fathers that is diverse and inclusive. And that is what resulted in those images that caused a stir. What we're doing, I mean, first off, this whole space is new. There's going to be hiccups like that along the way, and I think it's important that we understand that. And what's more important is the companies quickly, they recognize these mistakes and they correct them. That's what's important when we're moving fast like this. But at Microsoft, what we're doing, I mean, it's
like a good example is Sora. What they're doing with Sora right now, and you can touch on this more, but they're sort of seeing how it's going to affect everyone before it goes out widespread and affects the public, right?
We have a very similar approach at Microsoft. So Sora is doing what you said. At Microsoft, what we have, anytime I want to get a new feature out, if let's say I have an idea to improve how we can integrate AI in Microsoft Teams, for instance, the process would be internally, I work with designers and other project managers. We come up with that solution. What does it look like? We work with engineers to see how feasible is this? How could we build this? How long will it take us to build this? And once we have a plan together and we have consensus that this is what we want to build, then there's so many review processes. So there's internal reviews. Now we review with partner teams that work in like Microsoft AI. We review our products with them. Once we feel like on the product side, this is a good product, we want to deliver this to our users, then we have new groups that include lawyers that are ensuring responsible AI principles are upheld, ethics are upheld. And even then, after we clear all these hurdles, all of our releases are typically pretty slow. So we first release to internal audiences who might have caught some of the issue that Gemini had. So we'll release to internal audiences and slowly grow the user base that have access to these things. For Copilot specifically, it started as there was only a few companies. It was a private preview. We had a few companies that we are very close partners with, and they got early access to this, and they would give us feedback. They were using it in their everyday lives, and they would give us feedback, and that really helped us shape the direction of the product.
Can you explain how Sora is now being used in the same way?
So Sora isn't, Sora is not publicly available yet. All I know is the blog post OpenAI made. So Sora is first in the hands of security professionals, researchers, like academics. I read they're giving it to the film industry because they want to see how all these different personas across industries will react to this and what concerns do they have with this technology as they use it. So their goal is to catch these things upstream so then they can fix the problem before they have a public release of the model.
They want to ensure that it's executed properly on how it's released. But I've heard that what they also want to do is investigate some of the negative effects that something like Sora, for example, might impose on everybody. Can you explain what Red Teams is and how that's being used concurrently with Sora to sort of see how Sora might affect security?
It's related to my last response. So Sora is in the hands of, among the group that has access to it are Red Teams. Those are groups of security professionals that try to pen test the product and see how can we break it. So if you wanted to pen test this building, you would hire a security group. They'd see all the ways they could break in, basically. They'd try to get into this building however means possible. And then when they're done, they give you a report and be like, here's the gaps we found in your security. That's what a Red Team does. So with Sora, they're giving these models to companies to see, how could you abuse this? What could it be? What are the negatives that you could do with this? What harm could be caused with these models? And then once those teams give a report, OpenAI can get ahead of it and make sure they mitigate these things.
It's so interesting because it almost feels like there's an AI race, sort of similar to the space race that occurred in the 1900s. Why is there an AI race now, in your opinion?
Boy, the way you said 1900s makes me feel old, but we'll continue.
1960s,
Yeah.
1970s.
Yeah. So it does feel like a race. Yeah, all these companies, Meta, Google, Microsoft, we're all working on AI products right now. Even pretty much every company I've spoken with or have friends at.
Well, why now? This is a technology that's been around since the 50s and 60s.
It's different now. I mean, so we have to look at ChatGPT to answer this. ChatGPT launched in October 2022, I believe.
Yep.
Or November. And that was the game-changing moment. The tech ChatGPT is built on was published in 2018. It was put on a shelf somewhere. I don't think the academic circles saw the potential there. They clearly didn't.
Did Microsoft think it was going to be as successful?
I don't know when Microsoft got access.
Not that OpenAI and Microsoft are the same entity, but like Microsoft, OpenAI, sort of those other companies, did they foresee something like ChatGPT, just a text generator, being so popular and so widely used?
I don't think anyone foresaw what was going to happen here. Like I said, the tech was shelved. The GPT paper was published in 2018, put on a shelf. People didn't see it. And it wasn't until 2022 that OpenAI publicly released ChatGPT. And I think what was different from all the previous explorations in AI was this was really easy to use. The average person now could interact with AI. It was intuitive, it was simple, they intentionally picked an interface that we're all familiar with. We all know how to use messengers. They put it in a messenger interface. That was a very intentional decision, and it was familiar to people. So the difference that caused this race is we finally see like there's an appetite at scale, right? It's not just in power users or tech professionals that want to use these things. ChatGPT showed us that there's, teachers want to use these tools, and students and lawyers, and that's kind of what sparked, I think, the AI race, with all these companies seeing there's a market here that's untapped.
It's so interesting that just being connected to the internet, and you work with extensibility, if you can touch on that just a little bit, because it kind of ties into my next point. Can you explain what extensibility is and how you use it, how that sort of affects your role at Microsoft?
So the projects I'm specifically working on are Copilot extensibility. How do we get Copilot to interact with our other tools that we use that maybe are not in the Microsoft suite? So you mentioned LexisNexis and Westlaw are tools you use at work. So what extensibility means is how do we get these two things to work together?
Right now, ChatGPT is just hooked up to the internet, if I'm understanding correctly. Maybe that's wrong. Recently.
Yeah.
So I envision this, for example, let's say we could hook it up to LexisNexis, and now it can actually do legal research. And it's not just limited to like the general Google search. Do you think there's a future where ChatGPT could replace the traditional Google search?
I do, but before we get into that, one thing you said, which I think is interesting, you said it's connected to the internet, and I think a lot of people assume it's connected to the internet. Mm-hmm. What people don't realize is this model is running on a server somewhere, a lot of servers somewhere, but they're not using the internet. You could think of it like a brain. This model was trained on large data sets, huge data sets, and then it's sitting there, and if you had a good enough computer, you could theoretically run this locally. You could be in airplane mode and ask ChatGPT questions, mm-hmm. and it will respond. It doesn't need an internet connection to do the basis of what it does. Wow. And at launch, it wasn't doing that. It wasn't until, I believe, later last year in 2023 that they released the ability to connect it to the internet. So now when it doesn't have an answer internally in its model, it can reference things in the news, or it uses, I believe it's Bing it's using to pull that information.
The newer models, you can actually take a picture and it'll reason. Like, for example, my buddy uses it in this way. He'll take a picture of his fridge and it'll say, generate me a recipe, something I can cook for tonight's dinner. And it'll do that. What is the technology in something like that?
Yeah, okay. So when you take a picture, you're uploading it, they get that picture. The first thing they have to do is object recognition. So they're going to go through that picture and figure out what are all the objects we see here. And then they're going to probably compile some list of here's everything they have in their fridge. Then they're going to go to the language models and say, if I have these ingredients, what can I make? And then it'll come up with a list of here's what you can make from those ingredients. And then when it gets all that data, it'll compile it into a response. So from the user's point of view, all these things are happening behind the scenes. from the user's point of view, they'll be like, what can I make in my fridge? Here's a picture. Then they'll get a response. You can make, whatever, a salad tonight because you have these ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like magic. That's really how it works. It feels like magic to the average user. They don't realize how much is happening behind the scenes every time they ask ChatGPT a question.
It seems to me for this to affect us in the way that everybody's predicting, there has to be a layer where we're giving up sort of our privacy in order for it to do so, like people taking pictures of their refrigerator so this thing can generate a recipe for them. Or people taking pictures of their living rooms and being like, ChatGPT, what do you think the best configuration for my couches is? Things like that. What are some of the ways that our data is protected? Or on the flip side, are these companies able to harbor our data in making these AI models?
They could. It depends on what privacy policy you're agreeing to. Nothing is really free on the internet. It's a lot. Usually, it's data that you're paying to use these services.
You are the product.
Yeah.
Commonly said.
So it's important for people to understand the tools they're using. I saw a ton of spin-off apps on the market after ChatGPT's launch that are under the hood just using ChatGPT. They're putting a layer on it, and I'm worried. Like, what's that man in the middle doing with the data you're sending it?
Yep.
So especially if they're free, how are they making these things free? So it's something people should be mindful of and know the companies behind the products you use and know you trust them. I mean, I can only speak for Microsoft. I know that with Copilot, it's not learning anything about you. You give it input and what it's going to reason over your input plus your existing data in Microsoft. We're not using your inputs to further change the model,
Yep.
But others could be. There's nothing stopping that.
And I think that's something that government needs to regulate because people are traditionally bad at, viewing the short-term benefits against those long-term risks of exposing their privacy. Like, let's say a kid had to put in his phone number, email to have a ChatGPT model do their homework for the night. They would do that 100%, 10 times out of 10. And that's just some of the ways I foresee us needing to regulate.
A lot of these products put our privacy at odds with our convenience. That's what they're offering.
Yeah.
These tools are promising to make our lives easier, but often the time is privacy, and it's up to individuals to weigh that and see where they feel comfortable.
Data is everything as well. Can you kind of touch on how important data is and why it's so important for everybody to have access to data? Like, why is data valuable?
In the context of AI, it's valuable.
In the context of AI.
Yeah, it's valuable because these models are trained. They need large data sets to learn. They train off these data sets and they find patterns and they learn these patterns, and that's what they use to generate new content. So I feel like with the advent of all these new large language models, the value of data has definitely gone up. So things like Wikipedia, I think is now every model that's trying, anyone who wants to create their own model, start with Wikipedia. It's a free encyclopedia. It's massive, right? And then we saw Twitter 2 years ago start charging for API access because they're realizing people are pulling all of our data for free. Let's start charging it if anyone wants to pull data from Twitter. Reddit, huge source of data. They also started charging for API access. So all of these companies are realizing like we have a ton of data and we've been giving it away for free for people, other products that want to use it. Like, for example, just so you understand it, you used to be able to go on New York Times. They might talk about someone tweeted something, right? And you would see that tweet there.
Yeah.
Well, that's because New York Times was using an API to pull that tweet into their site so you could see it. So that's why Twitter would make these things free, is they want people to be publishing their content in their own sites and apps. But now they're realizing those same connections they're using for that are being abused by people that just want to pull it all and, train.
Is AI making us better at capturing data? For example, that refrigerator example that we just talked about. You could take a picture and now we have something where it can filter what's in that refrigerator. Like, let's say we had an AI model take a picture of us right now. It could decipher and decode everything in this room to bits, ones and twos, and data. Is that correct?
Ones and zeros.
Ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Ones and zeros.
I think it's going to create more data, ultimately. I think the data footprint of society is going to grow exponentially with AI because these tools ultimately generate data. That's at least what we're using them for.
They use data, but they generate data.
They use data, and they use data. It's, think of it like you send a kid to school. They're going to learn for so many years. Now they're able to go into the world and generate their own opinions and thoughts. And that's kind of what we're doing here. Is we spend time putting them in school. We educate these models with large data sets, and then. But yeah, I think the data footprint's going to grow. They're ultimately you're going to get more pictures. DALL-E is creating so many more pictures on the internet that are AI generated. Sora has the promise to create way more videos in our society. So I see a lot more data in our future.
Who has access to the most? Is it Microsoft?
To the most what?
Meaningful data when it comes to AI, would you say?
Totally depends on what you consider meaningful. I mean, as a lawyer, what is meaningful might be all case law in existence. What's meaningful to a doctor might be all medical records from every hospital in America. So I don't think there's one objective way to answer that. Microsoft, I mean, we're able to access only the data that our customers let us have, really. But I'd say the biggest ones would be Meta. That comes to mind for me. They own a lot of data, interaction data, how we talk on Instagram, the pictures we post, how we talk on Facebook, the content we post there. They own WhatsApp, which is a huge messenger. So anything that's sent there. So Meta owns a ton of data that is good at portraying how people interact with each other.
In that specific context, like you just said. It depends on the context where that data is
that context seems like it's a very appealing one for a lot of people. How do people interact with each other? That's what Meta, LexisNexis has a good set of data on case law, right?
Yeah.
Well, Meta has a lot of data on how do humans interact with each other. So that could be used for a lot of purposes.
Do you think it's on these AI companies, the ones that you mentioned, to sort of regulate themselves?
No, I mean, they should be not bad people, right? We should strive to only do good, all these companies, but that's why we have government in place to set these boundaries. And, I'm happy the FDA exists and I don't have to just trust the food companies to do the right thing. Like, we need legislation and regulation in these spaces.
But how well equipped is our government to be able to recognize and regulate some of these technologies, which the people building them themselves, like experts like you, might at some point accept that there's some uncertainty there with the future and how it's going to affect society?
I mean, that happens with the internet, with any big innovation. This is going to happen. I think right now we're seeing our legislators kind of start waking up. I'm seeing more action, more proposed legislation for regulation. They just have to keep their finger on the pulse of what these industries are doing in the space. Keep calling them in to testify, tell me how things work. And they have the tools to learn the information they want to learn. So
my last guest was actually, I think he goes yearly to testify before Congress on the dangers of deep fakes. And we can talk about that a little bit too, but how do you envision this is going to affect labor or other areas like work relationships or productivity? Productivity, obviously it's going to improve productivity, but do you think the net positive to society is going to be positive or negative?
We should hit those topics separately, but I believe it'll be a net positive outcome, all of this. I think the internet was a net positive outcome. Yes, has the internet led to bad things too? Absolutely. But overall, where would we be without it right now? It's enabled so many things to change the way we live. That's what I see when I look at AI. I think it's going to do something similar where it's going to change the way we every day to day. But so you said productivity, what else?
Labor. I think labor is one of the ways, and it's interesting because when this technology first, I know it's been around for a while now, since the 50s and 60s, but some of the jobs that they envisioned would go first, or maybe trucking jobs and factory jobs, blue collar jobs, where in fact it seems like white collar jobs might be the first to go. Lawyers in particular, we're seeing that these models can do research very well. They can write very well, almost better than humans. How do you think that's going to change the way we work? Do you think that's going to improve society? How are some of the ways you think that can improve society potentially?
In regard to labor, right?
Yeah.
I think we have to look at this for what it is. This is a tool. AI is a tool. It's a very powerful tool. And in history, if you look at any time new tools come out, the job market related to those tools will change. You might be able to have one person do what it took three to do before that tool came out. So there will be change. Industries will adapt. Ultimately, it's going to allow us to become more efficient, more productive. And I think new industries will start spawning. We're going to see other existing industries grow. The content industry, I think, is going to probably blow up now that we're democratizing the tools to create content. But yeah, I think no one can predict. If anyone's saying they know what's going to happen, they're lying. This is like an industrial revolution, and I think we can look to history to try to help us forecast what might happen next.
Yeah, that's sort of the point of this podcast, is to bring on all these different perspectives so we can meaningfully gauge where everybody stands in their respective areas. Like, you're building the products. There's other people who are tasked with, my last guest, David Dorman, he worked for the Department of Defense in combating misinformation that was coming from overseas against the United States. So, for example, they saw somebody that was on the US's most wanted list. They showed a picture of them when the US said, no, we took that guy out, or he's in jail right now. We're going to go in and like remedy that. It's so important to have these different perspectives so we can gauge, but I agree, like, there's no knowing like where this could go. Do you guys have any projects you're working on for the future that you can see, any new products that you think are going to come to fruition and change the world in the same way that ChatGPT and Copilot are doing?
I mean, Copilot is the game right now. I think that is going to change a lot of industry. It's going to make people more productive, organizations more productive. So beyond that, I'm not really thinking what are the other products. It's more of how will Copilot continue to evolve.
You're focused on Copilot.
Yeah, and how will that evolve? So,
is it going to be available on all future Windows products, or how is that going to work? Is it an application that we download, or is it going to come with Microsoft products?
There's a license attached to it, and if you're paying the license, it will get for your enterprise. It's going to be in all of your tools, so you can have it in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, Windows, Bing. It's kind of going to be persistent across the ecosystem.
And these are the early stages. You say that in the future it's going to be connected to different applications, like, for me, LexisNexis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean,
what's the horizon for that? What's the outlook?
I foresee a lot of companies building their own forms of copilots. That's kind of where I see things going. LexisNexis could be, maybe they are working on one right now for all we know. And why wouldn't they, right?
Yeah,
they use GPT to be the conversational
agent
there.
They already use AI in other respects that we might not be touching on. So
yeah, so I see a lot of different companies building their own, and I think the game's going to become, how do these two things talk to each other?
I know you're generally optimistic about these AI technologies, but are there any ways that you can think of these technologies might be dangerous? For example, when the internet first came out, there's a lot of scams going on. And now with deepfakes and speech recognition, the same dangers are coming to fruition again in a different light, because we haven't gotten to that learning curve where we're like, okay, we can't trust like phone calls, ridiculous phone calls that come from like family members saying that we're under ransom. Some people might get tricked by that, but it's going to take time now, as it was for the internet when it said, like, for example, you're the millionth user, you just won a car, click here to get paid. What are some of the ways, though, that you also think of the ways that these AI technologies can be dangerous and potentially harmful for people?
I think you touched on a lot of it. There's like deep fakes. It's going to be very easy to generate a lot of the content that could scam people potentially. But I think this is where, again, government has to kind of step in and set rules. We looked at it, even learning from our past mistakes. I think if we were to go back in time as a society, we would have probably put more safeguards in place for social media. That came out and we were like, yeah, let 7-year-olds create profiles. And I think that's, now we've realized unrestricted access to social media is probably not the best thing for kids to have. So hopefully we can learn from these past like mistakes and get ahead of the legislation here.
It seems like one of them might be misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to use AI to combat AI? An analogy might be when the internet first came out and viruses were a big concern in security. We used software to combat that, and now it's almost not an issue anymore. Is there a way we can use AI to go within the metadata to identify, sort of like watermarking, but not watermarking, stuff that's AI generated and stuff that isn't?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of research going on there for digital watermarking. A lot of times when you hear, watermarking, you think of physical, like there's a watermark on the image, but I know there's a lot of companies looking into ways to watermark content generated by their models in ways that the average user can't see, like it's in the data or it's in the metadata, kind of like a unique fingerprint that they leave somewhere on that they can later tell this was created by our models. So yeah, absolutely, AI can help with those efforts. We just have to make sure we're making the right investments to get ahead of it.
Do you think this is going to be a tool that exacerbates socioeconomic inequality, or do you think it's a tool that's going to actually remedy it?
It could be both. It depends on how we use it, how government regulates it. I hope and foresee it as something that will be more of the remedy.
Like you talked about movies. With future technologies, even current technologies, anybody can go on the internet and create a movie using these AI technologies, when before you needed $1 million budget, right? $2 million budget.
We're still not there. You still can't go make a movie. We're not there. I mean, we're pretty far off from saying you can make $1 million budget movie with AI. It could certainly help you with a lot of the tasks needed to create the movie, but it is not going to create the final product.
So you don't think with Sora, what's the other bubble? What is it called? The other...
I know there's like Stability AI has some models for video generation.
Are there any you've used personally?
I've used some, yeah. I tried to test out all these things, and they're not there yet. That's all I'll say. You can tell at a glance. There's like I know a big problem they're having is like hands. People keep missing fingers, so like, and you could tell. Now we know this is real because I have 5 fingers.
But Sora seems so, on the videos that I've seen on Sora, it seems so real, like 4K.
We don't really know what's going on under the hood there. We know the videos we've seen from Sora are being created by OpenAI. I don't know if those are just...
Is it closed source?
Well, right now it is. Yeah, right now you cannot go use it. So I don't know. And I also don't know those 10-second clips. Did it take a month to generate that? How long did that take? Because the challenge there is we have image generation, right? You can use DALL-E right now to say, show me a picture of a man holding a Starbucks coffee. But if you say, show me a picture of a man walking down the street holding a Starbucks coffee, that's essentially a ton of pictures that you then stitch together, combine it into a video. The challenge is how do you get the generation to be consistent from like image to image?
So you're pumping the brakes on videos as opposed to images. You think there's a big step up from creating videos using AI to creating images?
It's going to happen, but I'm saying it's definitely a very challenging effort, and I think we're just not there yet. I mean, things are moving so quick here. It could be in 3 months. I'm eating my words, but right now I think, I think we're a little bit out from having full movie production or anything like that.
Yeah. What are some of the ways you think this is going to improve society?
I think it's going to make people more productive. It's going to help them create things more freely. I think it's going to get rid of a lot of tasks that we find mundane today, and it'll help us do those for us. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. We can't forecast it, but it'll make us more productive.
I want to end with talking about how these technologies can be used for good. As you said, they can be used for bad. What are some of the ways we can prepare ourselves to be able to be ready for the AI revolution that everybody foresees coming?
We're in it. We're in the AI revolution. That's a great question, though. I would say for the average person, just be open. Don't go in with a closed mind. Be open. These are now tools in our everyday lives. I think the people that are using these tools will quickly start to be more productive than the ones who don't want to try it out. So try these new tools, try ChatGPT, try Copilot, try Gemini, and get, see how it can benefit you.
Yeah. Well, Gino, thank you for taking the time to come on and talk with me as an expert in product development at Microsoft. Your opinion is obviously very valuable, so thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Law, AI, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation with Gino, be sure to like and subscribe so you can follow the conversation going forward. Thank you.